That is what the master teacher Jesus said to come. Now, whether he's referring to the miracles or to the short order cook who was putting his eggs for breakfast remains to be seen. But one thing that I can definitely say about that idea is that what he was making a statement about is our inherent greatness. Our inherent greatness as a result of being one with the divine, which I can say is summed up very, very well by my friend Reverend Jody Stevenson, who a few years back when she was here left each of us a little placard, if you remember this, and it was her wisdom, condensed wisdom of the Tao, the wisdom of the Tao that she had. It was very, very simple. It's a simple affirmation that I see every single morning. I come from greatness. I attract greatness. I allow greatness. I am greatness. So friends, as we go through this today, as we go through this topic, I would invite you to keep that in mind, and perhaps that might be something that you might like to take into your own personal spiritual practice of primitive style over the next several weeks as we continue to move through our month-long series of moving from good to great, which is from a book by a gentleman named Jim Collins, and we'll get to Jim here shortly. But before we do that, I want to give you a little bit of an overview as to where this process actually came from. It wasn't, we didn't just dream this up. This wasn't something that our center just came up with willy-nilly by ourselves. We had some help with this, and the help came. And this is, in my mind, the most wonderful example that I can offer you of how this good to great process is working. It comes from Reverend Norm Bouchard, who is the senior minister down there at Centers for Spiritual Living in Colorado Springs. And Reverend Norm is a former Catholic priest who went into the corporate world. And while he was in the corporate world, he was a corporate trainer. Is that correct, Kathy? Yes, he was a corporate trainer. And what he did was he facilitated growth within organizations. And so that's where he came across this philosophy of good to great, which is, it's got some corporate feel to it, but don't let that fool you. Don't let that fool you. The elements and the principles of science of mind are contained within this volume. So anyway, Reverend Norm held a ministers' meeting a few years back, to which I was invited. Reverend Marilyn pulled me along on this. And he was able to demonstrate this process to us, to this group of ministers therein. And at that time, I sat there and I looked around at the church that these folks had, and I was absolutely blown away, and I thought, man, this process is awesome. I sure hope that we are able to implement this. And lucky for us, we have a leader that wanted to do this deal. So he got on board with this, and our leadership team is behind this entire process. So the example that I'm giving you, Norm and their church, Reverend Norm and their church, only had, guess what, folks, not a congregation much bigger than ours. About 75 to 80 people attending. As of a few weeks ago, when Reverend Norm visited us, they are now at 500 people per week. That is in 4 years of growth of utilizing this process. So, folks, we have some help coming along here, and thank goodness that's the case, that we have a leader that has enough humility to say, man, I love what you're doing. Let's find a way to see how we can make that work. And I want you to also know that Udon Center for Spiritual Living, as well as the Center for Spiritual Living in Northern Colorado, are undergoing the same process as we speak. And they, too, are having wonderful results beginning to come to pass. So, here's our friend Jim Collins. And as you heard Pauline relate that wonderful parable, which actually comes from his book, Jim Collins is actually he's a business guy, and he graduated from the Stanford Business School. And he's actually from Boulder, Colorado. So it's kind of an interesting thing. He went to Stanford, but maybe he's got some old heavy roots, I don't know. But either way, he and a team of his graduate students got together, and they spent an exhaustive amount of time studying what it was that separated good businesses from businesses that were, that became great, that became game changers. And they arrived at some interesting conclusions, of which the hedgehog concept is one of them. And for those of you who don't know, that is what a hedgehog looks like. You can kind of see the quills. He kind of looks like a nice little character, right? You know, I didn't quite understand the word downy, but I guess that's downy. And this is what the fox, this one's a kind of a hard slide to see, but this is what happens when the fox threatens the hedgehog, right? The hedgehog walls up and begins to do what is extremely important here. This is a common theme with what we will be talking about as the hedgehog concept. The importance here is it is a protective stance. And I want you to keep the idea of protection in mind as we go through this, because ultimately, friends, it is important that we learn to protect what it is that we are building here. How do we protect that vision? We have to learn to say no to things that do not fit within the vision. And that takes practice. In a few weeks, we are going to have an opportunity each and every one of you to give your input. It's going to be on a Sunday following a service. And we want to know what it is that you are passionate about here. What it is that why do you come to this center? Why do you do what we do here? And what is it that you believe that we can be the best at? Those are all elements that we're going to discuss here. But the thing is, it was interesting last week when Reverend Rick talked about this idea of, did anybody here know what the vision was? Did anybody here know what the mission of this center was? Yeah, it was a little murky, wasn't it? So today, that's what we're going to do, is begin the process of clarifying, bringing clarity to that vision. When I first thought about the hedgehog and the fox, I couldn't help but think about these two. This came to me in meditation. So we have our pal, the coyote, and I promised you a visit in the e-blast, a visit from an old friend. So our old friend today is going to be the coyote, Wile E. Coyote. And we have the roadrunner, who is very much like the hedgehog, and just, one purpose, it does what it does, and that's all that it does, right? But our friend Wile E., what is he? Here he is right here. He is a card-carrying genius. Man, how many of you would like to have a card like that? He is constantly seeking exterior knowledge. That is what Wiley does. He's trying to catch the roadrunner, right? Because you saw him earlier with a fork and a knife in his hand. He's busy trying to feed himself. But the problem is that I'm not sure that Wiley has a very good, clear, concise vision of what it is he's trying to do. He gets most of his ideas from who? Acme. It's funny, you might as well say Amazon. But here are some of the methods that he tries. And usually a lot of them revolve around the rocket. And being somewhat unpracticed at this entire thing, look what he's doing. He's busy lighting himself on fire rather than the wick. Right? So the point here is that Wiley tries so many different things because he's clever. And he thinks he has, all these things at his disposal. Wherein what he's doing is ignoring perhaps a clear focus on one area that could bring about the desired result. So here's some more of the methods he tried. Man, the explosive tennis balls. Who doesn't remember those? Dehydrated boulders. Does this sound bad to you? The do-it-yourself tornado kit. And earthquake pills. Why wait? All of them invariably end up with Wiley in this position, sliding off of a canyon. And with a sign, as he goes straight down to the canyon floor. Which that I do not have. They didn't have a slide for that. What's Wiley's real problem? Does Wiley ever really ask for any kind of help? Does he ask for any kind of guidance? I mean, he's kind of sitting there getting it from a book, but does Wiley have anybody that is helping him to raise the bar so that he can move from an area of being good to great, right? That's the difficulty that our friend Wiley has. He thinks he's so smart, he thinks he can solve all his problems by himself. But he fails to ask anybody for some help. And that's why I'm so proud of our spiritual leader here. He's not afraid to ask for some help. So Wiley really kind of suffers from a lack of vision, which is summed up real well in a quote from Ernest Holmes in the Science of Mind textbook. Man's conscious thought, acting through law, may change any condition in his experience, provided he has clearly conceived of such conditions being changed. Clearly conceived. The idea that he didn't come from a vision kind of puts him in this position. And here's the thing that I sat and thought about when I'm thinking about Wiley. Am I still like Wiley? Am I still scattered enough that that I'm busy trying all these other things? Or am I personally living from a vision that puts me in a position to succeed? So the hedgehog concept, friends, as we get into this right here, keep in mind as well that it's on a personal level, it's on an individual level, as well as a collective group level too. Let's go back to Jim Collins again. This is from his work. This is a three-circle diagram to describe the hedgehog concept. Now this is known as a Venn diagram, which I did not know until recently, which is, that's what I love about being able to put something like this together. I learned an awful lot. And this was actually put forward by a gentleman named John Venn, who was a British logician and philosopher. And this has an awful lot of meaning, these three circles. And it's interesting, what's interesting about it is that it's not just like he was the first guy that really put these circles together. Did you figure that? He was the first guy that maybe got published, who knows? But I will say this, there is something that is interesting about this diagram. Using the pointer here, you see how we have these overlapping areas right here? See this? That in and of itself is an ancient symbol called the triquetra. And as it says here, the triquetra has long been used to symbolize the Holy Trinity, but predates Christianity in its use as such. This symbol has been found in Celtic and Nordic inscriptions and arts, as well as on Germanic coins and Swedish runes as far back as the 11th century. Some modern traditions use it to represent the connection between the mind, body, and soul. In Celtic-based pagan traditions, it is often used as a symbol of the three realms of earth, sea, and sky. In the past, there has been speculation that the triquetra is a symbol of the triple goddess, or was used as a Celtic symbol of feminine spirituality, though no solid scholarly evidence has been found to date. And while that may be true, I did find other areas that said that may be written. I did find other areas that really didn't have that actually stated. Another thing that is interesting about this is that Wiccans, which let's think of Wiccans as modern-day Druids, folks, okay? Sometimes use this as, get this, I was blown away when I heard this, a protective symbol. This symbol, the hedgehog concept, has at its core protection as its philosophy. And it is made up of three components. And for this idea right here, it said that earlier that we could use the Holy Trinity to represent some of these things here, which would be Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right? For our version of that, as science of minders, we might use cause, medium, and effect. These three circles represent the creative cycle for us as an individual, as an organization. And we're going to use a mechanical model to demonstrate that it's an engine. And we're going to use the internal combustion engine as that model. So let's examine the first one. The first one, which we're going to go ahead and term as being the fuel for the organization, is what drives your economic engine. And in our case, being a social sector, we don't necessarily have like a bunch of outside capital that drives everything. What is our major resource here at Centers for Spiritual Living Partner? You, my friends. You are our major resource here. your time, your talent, your treasure, your use of the law of science of mind to become greater and greater is what becomes the resource for this organization. You are the giver. Without you, there is no organization. Nothing else comes further in this model. This model simply does not work. Moving from fuel, what is required in order for flame to happen? Spark, right? We have to have spark. And that right there, my friends, is what you are passionate about. That is the medium through which everything happens. As you heard Reverend Rick talk about in the first week of this month, he talked about the idea that emotions and feelings are in fact what helps things to help the law to manifest things for us. And that is in truth, that is a form of passion. When I gave a talk back in April, perhaps you remember where I talked about the intersection of divinity and humanity coming here at the human heart, right? That is where passion is located. That is where passion is located. And how do we engender passion within this entire model? It comes from what the word that Reverend Rick used last week. Discipline. Discipline. How many of you, when you hear that word, just like me, have a little bit of a negative connotation? Ugh, man, I don't like that word. I really don't like that word because it's like there's something negative about it. The truth of the matter is that I'm looking at it a little bit wrong. I need a little bit better definition of discipline. So for our purposes here, I'd like you to think of it as practice. Practice. What is our practice to be? So friends, the truth of the matter is that our passion and us using the science of mind principles in our own lives and creating demonstrations and creating them on a regular basis, consciously using the law to choose that which we would have in our lives, consciously using it, and then sitting back and saying, oh my gosh, I cannot believe the results. I cannot believe how my life is. There's kind of a funny aspect about that, and that engenders passion, right? When we get those results, what happens? We're excited. We're excited, right? And we want to be able to share those results with other people. There's one of my favorite parts of this kind of service is when we get somebody that comes up here and says, hey, David, the law's working in my life. You know, I love that kind of stuff. And the truth is that we have this tendency to be a little bit, and I speak from experience, maybe it's part of the human condition, but what happens is things get to be good. And we're kind of okay. It's like, I'm okay with this level of good. I like it. I like my life. I like how things are. I like this center. I like how everything's going on here. It's all really good. We've got a lot of great people. And what invariably ends up happening is I stop choosing consciously. Anybody else experience this? That becomes the baseline. And as a result of that baseline, I am not actively generating passion anymore. Because, friends, there is such a thing as spiritual muscle. It really is there. You must use it, or you will lose it. That's how it works. So we have to practice this. And as we practice this, we become a greater resource to the center. We become a greater resource. And I love that, what drives our resource engine, because it's another example of source, right? Source is contained in the word resource. It is God working in, through, and as each and every one of us. And in our final circle here, we have what you can be best in the world at. And this, in our model, represents effect. So we've had cause, we've had medium, we've had effect. And what happens when you have fuel and a spark? What do you get? Fire. You get fire. That's what happens. You get fire. So we begin to see the results of our passion, of our group, of everybody working together. Now, the thing is kind of funny that hit me the other morning when I was sitting there with this, is it's kind of an odd paradox. This is what we can be best in the world at, and it's an effect. However, my friends, we must learn to dream bigger, because we have to come from that area in order to have the vision. So this effect is actually the vision as well. So as you take this kind of into your meditation over the next couple of weeks, I'd like you to begin thinking about these three questions and how they apply to you. What are you passionate about? What do you believe that you can be best in the world at? And then when we take that together, we get to come into this hedgehog concept. Now you'll note here the thing that the hedgehog's right in the middle, right? There's an important factor to this. Like any kind of wheel, let us imagine that this is a cog in a wheel. Like any wheel, if something is unbalanced, what happens to the wheel? Clunk. Anybody ever had you lose a wheel weight on your tire? It kind of feels like it's lurching. And what happens? The tire wears out extremely fast, doesn't it? It doesn't wear evenly. Our goal here as a center is to get as close as we can to that center area right there. And the beauty of it is the further that we move into that center, the more protected our ideology becomes, and the more powerful it becomes as well. Jim Collins would sum it up like this. Greatness, it turns out, is largely a matter of conscious choice and discipline. After his exhaustive study, what did he find? He didn't say, I don't think he'd ever set foot in the Center for Spiritual Living or a Science of Mind church, friends. But that's a science of mind right there. That's exactly what it is. A couple of years back, I was actually for the annual chili cook-off. So I'm excited about that again. I won't wear white. That could be a problem, right? It's our annual costume dress-up. I dressed up as a Boy Scout. You guys remember this? And I was fortunate enough to give a service, or give a talk on Domingo Ruiz's fourth agreement, which is always do your best. And at that time, I shared with you it was a little maxim that came from Tim Duncan, who was a perennial all-star from the San Antonio Spurs. And it goes like this: good, better, best. Never let it rest. So you're good, it's better. You're better, it's best. For our purposes, I'm going to change that up just a little bit, because I live with an attitude of expectancy, friends. I can see 500 people in this place. I see it. Good, better,